Hi there, welcome to the week ahead with Pivot Trader. Today I'm going to focus on gold. I did a video for Money Morning on the weekend about gold, but it is the most interesting thing I can see out there. I think it's quite a good little opportunity if gold can take off from these levels with all of those beaten up gold stocks out there. So I'm going to focus on that today for you, just in case you may have missed the video I did in Money Morning. So just looking at this, a recap, just very quickly. We've got the long-term chart here, of course. The main thing I want you to focus on here is the fact that we've had this very strong trend to the upside from 2019 to 2020, which went and took out the old all-time high from around 2012. And we've had a correction since. It's been a 15-month correction. But if we just focus in on that trend that we've had for the last few years, even though gold stocks are, fairly well beaten up, the retracement we've seen of the wave, that very strong wave from 2018 to 2020, look at that correction and, we haven't even hit the 50%. It's been about a 19% correction from the highs. So even though it's been selling off and it's been weak, it still has been pretty well supported. We haven't seen a really big sell-off in reaction, and that could still be coming. The main point I want to make today, those levels I gave you quite a while ago, if you have been watching these videos, 1680 in gold. I'm turning bearish below there, but that can be good as a trader, because if you know where you're wrong, if you're looking at what the potential upside is, if this thing can take off and break out to new all-time highs, if inflation really takes off, who knows what's coming, but you have a nice clear line in the sand here where you're wrong, and you run away from the position, and then you live to fight another day. Because if this thing can't really carry on, even if we have a bit of a rally now, but then the music stops, it breaks down below that 1680 level, there's just a lot of dominoes for me below the market where I could see or expect to see quite a sell-off. And I think if we saw that, gold would be brilliant buying down around that sort of 12 to 1400 region, because I think ultimately gold's heading a lot higher. It's just the age-old question, when is it going to do it? Now, just looking at the shorter-term chart, if I just focus in on the correction, and I'll be going over old ground for you, but I want to make sure it's all very clear. If I just really trace out the downtrend that we've seen from the all-time high, you can see we've had clear waves to the downside of lower lows and lower highs. That hasn't finished yet necessarily. We're actually just in that final wave to the downside, and price action since then has been contained within that down wave, hasn't it? So we could even zero in on that particular wave to understand the price action we're seeing a little bit better. And you can see, if we're just looking at that most recent wave to the downside of the correction, what has price action done? Well, it's been up into the sell zone of that wave, and it's been rejected from there back to the point of control, which is a midpoint. That's around 1817 is the midpoint of that wave, and that's exactly where prices are right now. So that's 1 point to make. But also on the downside, you can see the buying pressure coming in around the buy zone of that little wave. So we've had multiple buying impulses from the buy zone of that wave, and the third time is the most recent. taking prices back to that point of control. So we're right there now, right at that point of control of that particular down wave that we've been stuck in for the last, year, pretty much. And I reckon we're getting ready to test what's above the market now. We should really shoot through to the upside. And if we do that, we're looking at the bigger wave coming into play. So I'm really looking at the whole correction from the all-time high all the way down to the low of the correction. And, the point of control of that is up around 1876. So that's still a bit higher than where we are now. I really think we're heading there, and we could head there quite quickly once we break out above 1835. Now, not there yet, but, I really think above there, it could be pretty quick to that 1875 region. And we could even be ready for a rotation all the way to the top, to the sell zone of that whole correction. So that would be up around, 1980 to 2020 to 2020. So, a rotation like that, and we can definitely expect to see the gold stocks picking back up and having a nice rally. So just looking at the last few weeks' price action, I've been, getting more bullish, but still a bit wary. And if I'm just looking at the very short term, I'm just analysing how this price action has turned around on that weekly. And we have the lowest bar in that move. So there. And once we get the weekly close above there, which is on this bar, there's your weekly buy pivot. And then we've had lots of work since. And last week's price action was the first key bar in the move, with a weekly close above the high of that weekly buy pivot. So that just ratchets this whole weekly trend higher with the first weekly key bar in place. Then I can just start to analyse that last week's range, and the midpoint of that coming in around 1788. So that's around here. So, we've had a strong week last week after, it's a $60 range. It's pretty rare that it just takes off in a straight line the next week. So, we may see a bit of weakness, but I'd expect there to be good support around that 1788 region. I'd really like to see it hold, actually, just to keep this little weekly trend marching higher. And if all of that sort of takes place and all the levels hold, and we see this 1835 region breached in the short term, it just starts to set off a bit of a domino reaction to the upside towards that 1880 region. And look, it can even head over the next few months up towards the sell zone of that area. So I'd like to see that take place, but let's just take this one step at a time. So it is set up quite nicely. We're getting the weekly trend starting to develop. The weekly moving averages having crossed really, 10-week exponential above that 20-week simple. So all sort of pointing up at the moment, but it is something that can be negated pretty quickly. I mean, it's a tough market to predict, and it's been a 15-month-long correction so far, and we've seen already a couple of attempted rallies snuffed out. So, we may still be in for more work before it's ready to take off. But with the yield curve flattening worldwide, those long bonds really rallying quite sharply over the last few weeks, I think we're getting the sense that negative rates are here for quite a while if inflation continues to surprise to the upside, and market expects they can't really raise rates very far before the economy dips again. So it should be a good environment for gold. So I'm really thinking it could continue to the upside. And just a few quick ideas on stocks that I think are looking all right. If gold does continue to the upside, I think Silver Lake Resources, with a monthly buy pivot last month, looks pretty interesting. Would be a buyer on weakness for that one. Also, Evolution looking like an ABC buy signal shaping up here, and that's the A leg, B leg, C leg. So really just waiting for overlap for that one to start to take off again to the upside. Also Perseus, one of the strongest gold stocks out there. It's actually sitting on the highs, unlike most gold stocks out there. So showing you if gold does take off, that will probably be one of the strongest performers. Gold roads as well, holding there pretty well compared to most gold stocks. The trend still looking quite solid here. Seeing buying pressure in that 1 to 2 standard deviation Bollinger Band below the 20-month simple moving average. That's just an area where I look for reversals, and it's just sort of happening. We've had 2 attempts here, and so that's probably, good buying on the back foot, and I'm running away below 80 cents. And SBM quite weak, but it's in an interesting area where I think it could rally from being the top of the buy zone of that huge wave up from 2015 to 2018. If we get a monthly buy pivot, it'll be a false break of that low from early 2020. It'll just look pretty interesting from there, especially if gold prices really take off. I'd expect it to head back to the midpoint of that whole wave up above 250. And also just finally, Newcrest Mining, not quite there, but trying to get going. It's had a nice trend to the upside, but it's been struggling the last few years. If I just look at that last wave to the upside, I'm just really looking at that area, the buy zone of that wave. There's been 3 rallies out of there, so maybe we'll see another one. And with a monthly buy pivot, would just give you a bit more clarity on the momentum to the upside. And yeah, running away down below that sort of $19 region. If things can't carry on, you'd get out of that one. Yeah, if it broke down below that wave. So it's not a bad risk reward, especially if gold's about to spike to the upside. Should continue to run from here. So there's just a couple of large caps to keep your eye on if gold can take off. All right, well, I think that's enough for this week. I'll come back with more next week. Cheers.